Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Senior Science Fellow and Principal Atmospheric Scientist for Nutrient Ag Solutions. And this video brought to you by Farm Credit Illinois is going to dig into what spring gave us in terms of weather and what summer possibly holds as we go forward. So let's start here. This map shows the May through early June precipitation ranks by climate district. When you look across the country, we see a pretty large spread. Very wet in the northwest, very wet in the northern plains, causing some major delays, and also wet in the mid-south. But across the state of Illinois, for the most part, May delivered pretty normal precipitation. It's not to say there aren't a few places that are drier than average, but as we look across the state of Illinois compared to the rest of the Corn Belt, we got off to a pretty darn good start this year compared to our nearby neighbors. On the temperature side of things, though, since April, we are technically in a bit of a deficit in terms of GDU accumulation. Not nearly as bad as the northern plains or getting into the Pacific Northwest, where they're off by as much as 250 GDUs. But that's been because the temperature pattern across much of the country has really favored colder weather across the northern tier of the U.S. That isn't until we got deep into the month of May where a lot more warmth started to spread in the eastern Corn Belt, and we can certainly see that. Something to point out here, though, the deficits in the northern plains versus the surplus in the southern plains has been something that's really divided the country in terms of the position of that jet stream. That's something that's important to talk about here in a few moments. But if you did get a lot of your field work done and then planting done in the month of May, we've actually put quite a bit of heat into this crop. Much of the state of Illinois is running 30 to 60 GDUs above normal since May 1st, getting into early June. Soil moisture is a bit more of an interesting story. Take a look at this map, which was made on June the 6th. We do see in the top 16 inches some drier pockets in places, but this is a product produced by NASA that's an estimate of soil moisture. And given some of the rains that are going to be coming into the state here as we go into this second full week of the month of June, it starts to really pull back on the concerns of early season drought development. And where the concerns are going to be for that are really shown here well in the June 2nd update from the Drought Monitor. Much of the western part of the United States still remains in drought, and we don't really have much drought to speak about across the state of Illinois at this particular point. We're a little abnormally dry in the northern part of the state, getting into southern Wisconsin, but overall, much of the drought risk still remains to our west. And according to the Climate Prediction Center, that's where the biggest concern is going to be going into summer. You can see here on this map, which shows where drought is likely to develop or where it's going to persist, that most of that's going to be in the west and in the western Corn Belt. I want to take just a moment to kind of explain why that's the case and take a longer look out at this weather. In the near term, we're dealing with a powerful bit of the jet stream. You see this as it resets here, extending all the way from parts of Asia across the Pacific, unblocked, open, and moving, and pouring here into the United States. And the net effect of that is to deliver quite a bit of precipitation. If we just look at the next week, so basically the 6th of June through the 13th of June, what we're going to see here is that there's going to be a corridor kind of right in through this area that we're going to see a lot of storms kind of forming on rather weak frontal boundaries, but wrapping up into a broader low here. So we're going to see multiple chances even this week of getting some storms. The greens represent where we're above average on precipitation. That's what we have now. But the pattern's about to shift around a little bit, and this is something I want to keep you all well aware of. We start to see it in the temperatures first. This is what the next 5 days holds for us, gets us out there to about June 11th. So the jet stream kind of comes in and dives like this. We have a bit of a cooler bias. Not going to be cold, but certainly not going to be hot for this time of year. As we press out there, though, to day 10 through 15, this would be the middle of the month, the pattern shifts and starts to dip into troughs over the west and broader ridges in the central part of the United States. And that's a significant shift over where we've been. We need to talk about that. So if you look right now on June 6th through the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, we still see this long, unbroken piece of the jet stream that starts, in Africa, goes across Asia, the Pacific Ocean, and finishes somewhere in England, right, in Ireland. But what happens is once we get past the middle of the month, the models have been very consistent about breaking that up. Here we are on the 15th, 16th, 17th. Now do you start to see these troughs cutting in here? What they're separating is larger ridges, like one north of Hawaii, one that's potentially going to form in the Central Plains, and split flow into the Atlantic. Now, why I want you to care about this is that historically, if there's going to be drought risk in the central United States, you have to have this triple ridge setup taking place. So you can see all three of those high pressure cells showing up there. Now, this is just what the mid-June to late June pattern is going to look like. What we would want to know is this something that's going to be persistent as we get into the month of July? We do know we're a bit behind, so we expect to have pollination, closer to mid-July than the beginning of July. And if we see more of these ridges in the flow of the jet stream like this, well, it tends to make the coasts cooler and wetter, and the central part of the United States warmer and drier. We're going to watch to see if that's going to happen in the models. What's helping drive this is the fact that we still have a La Nina. This would be our third year of La Nina. And even though it's beginning to fade a little bit here, which is very typical for this time of year, we do have some cold water off the Baja and still some cold water in places in the Gulf of Alaska. The worst signals for us to have extensive drought in the state of Illinois would be to have La Nina and cold water that follows everywhere along that arrow that I'm drawing right here. We don't quite have that. What we're going to watch for is warmer water here to start to encroach along the west coast. If that happens over the next 30 days or so, that helps eliminate our late season drought. But as of now, it's still sitting there. This La Nina, as I said, is weakening as expected as we go towards summer. But still, the ocean temperature anomalies, even though they've been warming in the central Pacific Ocean, are still in that La Nina territory. We generally consider +5 to -0.5 Celsius anomalies in the central Pacific to be considered neutral. Colder than that is La Nina. Now, as we think about what La Nina might mean for summer, I want to show you a map that's just cause for some concern, and it's this one here. For July to September, if you go grab all of our moderate strength and our very strong La Nina events, which are listed here, all right, what we find is that the risk of drought increases in the western Corn Belt. It tends to be wetter on the East Coast, active hurricane season in the Gulf Coast. We do not tend to see a lot of heat extremes in the west or major precipitation anomalies. It just shifts right here in the middle part of the United States. And maybe some indicators like the strength of this La Nina in spring, which was stronger than I anticipated, many others did as well, could be an indication that this could increase the risk in the central and western Corn Belt going forward. Now, where does Illinois sit? We kind of straddle this. We straddle on one side of the Mississippi, probably having a better chance at more ridge-riding storms versus drought development in the western Corn Belt. And that's been a concern of mine for several months now. So let's get a look at the new long-range data as we wrap this one up. First map I want to show you was just released today on the 6th when I'm recording this. And what you're getting here is the June 16, after that pattern break, the June 16 to July 16 30-day precipitation anomaly. And what we see is that the risk of being a bit drier in the Central Plains is highest. What this means is likely that a ridge in the jet stream sets up here, so the flow comes around it. What we will likely see in this situation is where I'm drawing these arrows, we'll get northwest flow in the jet stream and a lot of thunderstorm activity at times. This will be where those squall lines kind of build out of the northwest to move across Illinois. Do they deliver at times stronger winds? Yeah, but they also deliver precipitation. The risk is in the west. Do we develop drought here? There's certainly some strong indicators that that's going to be the case. In terms of temperatures, well, we have been at times cool this spring, but take a look at the forecast, again, June 16 to July 16. We really start to bring in the warmth under that ridge, and that'll extend over to Illinois, which means we are going to likely favor, after we get past the middle of June, more warmer days than cooler days. It's difficult to say the timing of heat stress, but normally when our crops are in their vegetative stages, putting on a little extra heat isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as there's some soil moisture there, and we've seen the precipitation stats at the beginning of this video. But where this all takes us is into the longer range. And what I want to show you next is what that La Nina looks like by the middle of summer. It shifts a bit south of the equator, but it's still present. There's quite a bit of warm water in the Atlantic, which would be an indicator of having a more active hurricane season. When those systems develop, they'll have the heat from the ocean to feed on. But the cooler water here and the fact that the model isn't pushing the warm water yet up against the west coast means that as you kind of zoom in here in the United States, and instead of looking at ocean temperature, we look at precipitation, the models are still showing drier conditions, right here in the central United States. Now, if I could make some modifications to this, what I would think would happen is that the ridge might follow either the front range or the spine of the Rockies. And the flow likes to come over the top of this. And as we said, northwest flow in summer tends to develop on these lines here, these arrows, a lot of summer thunderstorm activity, not well resolved by the model. I think it's going to be a case as the farther to the west you go from Illinois, the greater the drought risk is going to be. At least those are the lead indicators that we see right now. So a lot of eyes are going to be on the state of Illinois and to our west to see how the summer drop possibly sets up. We're still too early to make a perfect call on it, but what you've just seen me present is the risk as it currently stands. And that's why we at Farm Credit and Nutrient Ag Solutions are there to partner with you to keep you aware of these things, to be our trusted advisor so that we can help make these decisions as the crop season unfolds and how weather tends to be our greatest source of risk going forward. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'll keep reporting back to you.